Hello and welcome to yet another episode of History Time. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had presented to you the plans of the government via Chennai Metro Rail to construct a 27-storied central tower facing Central Station on Periyar EVR Road. Close on the heels of that, we now present yet another plan to construct a multi-storied building at the Broadway bus terminus. It was originally supposed to be for 21 floors, but that has been brought down to 8 floors now. Whether it is 21 or whether it is 8, is a multi-storied building at all required at that location is the question. But before we go on to that, let us look at the history of the Broadway bus terminus and the surrounding areas. In the 18th and the 19th century, there was no public transport. People walked around and they used their private means of carriages. And then finally, horse carriages came about in the 19th century. In the closing years of the 19th century, Madras acquired its tramway service. One day, I must come back to you with a full episode on the history of the Madras Tramway Corporation. But I am yet to find all the details, and so I am still on a search for it. But in 1925, Madras Tramways was the principal source of public transport. And that year, the employees of the tramway service went on a strike. The tramways immediately brought buses into service. And that was when the citizens of Madras first experienced what it was to travel by bus. The tramway service stopped the buses in 1928, but the people of Madras had experienced what bus journeys were. Private operators were quick to move in, and thereafter buses came into operation run by private companies. At the time of independence, there were 200 buses in the city operated and run by private companies. As soon as independence came in 1947, the government stepped into public transport by introducing 30 buses as its own service and what was known as the Government of Madras Transport Service. The next year, the Madras government nationalized all the private buses and took them over. The Madras Government Transport Service was a department of the government and it needed headquarters. This was Transport House that was built on Band Practice Road. Where is Band Practice Road? It doesn't exist in name any longer, but you will be familiar with it if I tell you where it is. You all know where the Gymkhana Club is. And facing the Gymkhana Club is a road leading to Bodyguard Muneeswarar Temple. That was Band Practice Road. And this is where Transport House came into existence. Transport House and the Madras Government Transport Service remained in operation till 1972, when it was decided it was better to transfer this entire service to a corporation. And that is when the government-owned Pallavan Transport Corporation came into existence. When started, it was operating around 1,000 buses, catering to 12 lakh people. Today, there are around 3,000, catering to 26 lakh people. The only difference is that the population of the city, when the 12 lakh people were using the bus services, was probably 20 lakhs or so. Today, with a population of 1 crore and more, I think we need to wonder as to how people are able to manage with the transport services that are in offer. Be that as it may. When Pallavan Transport Services Corporation came into existence, Transport House was renamed Pallavan House and Band Practice Road became Pallavan Salai, which is the name that it still uses today. Right from the time that the Government Transport Service came into existence, which was in 1948, the Corporation of Madras began to debate on whether it needed to build bus shelters where people could wait for the buses. In that era, none of these existed. There would be a pole with a tin sheet on which there would be a sketch of a bus, and people would identify that to be a bus stop and wait there. Finally, in 1957, the Corporation of Madras decided that it would begin building bus shelters, and that is how bus shelters came into existence. The biggest of these would be at Broadway, facing Georgetown. Georgetown was, after all, the commercial hub of the city. This is where the High Court was and is still located, and most people travel to it. Therefore, the biggest of the bus terminuses would have to be in Broadway at one end of Georgetown. Like all public facilities in the city, there was no planning involved. Informally, the buses began to stop at a particular location. That became the Broadway bus terminus. And then the government was faced with the responsibility of doing some planning and creating some facilities. Broadway was where all the intra-city bus transport service operated from. Then you had an entire set of buses which were going into the hinterland, into the Mofussil. All of these stopped at right angles to the Broadway bus terminus on what was known as Esplanade Road, facing what was called the Travancore Maharajas Park. That park doesn't exist any longer, but it was created in 1936 to commemorate the temple entry proclamation of the Travancore government. A statue of the then Maharaja of Travancore, Chitra Tirunal Balarama Varma, was put up, and a small park was created all around it, and the Mofussil buses all began to stop near this statue. From the 1950s, the Corporation of Madras began debating on what it needed to do to improve the condition of the Broadway bus terminus. There were complaints about congestion, there were complaints about intrusion, there were complaints about illegal occupation, all kinds of things. In 1964, Mayor Velur Narayanan, who coined the term Singara Chennai, began to ask as to what could be done. He in fact said that there were more number of shops than buses in the Broadway bus terminus, and the stench from food and garbage was really overpowering. But it took till 1972 for the government to come to a decision to build a proper bus terminus here. And that decision was taken by the then formed MMDA, which is now known as the CMDA. Thereafter, the Broadway bus terminus came into existence. The Esplanade bus terminus, in the meanwhile, had swallowed up the entire Travancore Maharajas Park, and the statue was leading a very lonely existence. Finally, in the early 2000s, the statue was shifted to Adyar, where it stands next to the Ananta Padmanabha Swami temple. The Broadway bus terminus continued in operation. It took over the lands of the Madras United Club and expanded, but congestion never reduced. There were all kinds of plans for it. There were multi-level parking lot tenders. Periodically, all kinds of theories and all kinds of budgets would be highlighted, but nothing really happened. Another casualty in the process is the Kuralagam building. Planned as the headquarters of the Khadi and Village Industries Board of the government, its foundation stone was laid in 1962 by Soundaram Ramachandran, the Congress worker. It was finally inaugurated on January 14, 1968 by C.N. Annadurai, the then Chief Minister of Madras. Is such a building necessary at all in Broadway is a question. Whether it is 21 floors or 8 floors, is it not an intrusion into what is already a very congested area? Some of you may ask me whether I am against development and whether putting an end to multi-storied buildings is not going against the grain of growth of Georgetown and its surrounding areas. I disagree. It is not necessary to put up multi-storied buildings in order to demonstrate development. The next question is, there are already several multi-storied buildings in the area. Then why are you objecting to this one? My answer to that is that all those multi-storied buildings have already caused enough chaos and havoc in that area. Do we need one more multi-storied building to add to them all? Not at all. Development does not mean putting up multi-storied buildings. In global warming, we have what is known as the urban island effect. It is the metropolitan cities that are showing the maximum growth in summer temperatures. It has been demonstrated in Delhi, in Chennai, in several other places. Adding multi-storied buildings made of glass and concrete and running on air conditioners is only going to add to global warming. Development does not mean putting up multi-storied buildings. On the other hand, the question is, what kind of a world are we leaving for the succeeding generations to come? And environment has a very important role to play in that. I'm sure the government will ponder over this question before it comes to a conclusion. If you like this episode, like it, share it, and subscribe to this channel. And I promise that I will soon be back with you with fresh episodes from the history of Madras, that is Chennai. Bye for now.